Well guys, the power's out. Running around with the torch on the phone at the moment because yeah, it's flooding outside. So we're copping this tropical cyclone, the edge of it, and looks like the shed's flooding. The side of the house is starting to flood a bit. So the Bluetti's powering the fridge, so at least we got cold food for little Belle. And I'm gonna brave this weather, go outside. I've got chickens I've got to get in the shed. We've got all sorts going on, so come with me. We'll see how this footage turns out. It'll be a GoPro with a lot of rain and see how we go. Let's get it done. Woo! Holy! Holy! Check this out! Okay, I've got to go save our chickens. See how this goes. Holy. Oh. Right, girls. Oh no, the shed's flooding. Fuck. Kenny. That's the chicken safe. Actually made a makeshift chicken pen for the cyclone just in case. So now I've just got to quickly run around, grab all my tools off the ground. I got most of them off the ground in the shed already, but yeah, okay, quickly run around, get some shit off the ground. Starting to come in pretty hot and heavy now. It's coming in under all the doors. You can see it lapping in here. So yeah, I've got a freezer up the side of the shed. We've lost power, so I've got Bluetti running the shed at the moment for the lights. So I think I'm going to pinch this Bluetti unit, take it around the side of the house, plug the freezer into that. The fridge is already running off another Bluetti unit. And then, yeah, that means at least all our food's safe. And I've also got a portable Bluetti, a smaller one, for inside the house, so laptops, phones, any that sort of stuff, so we can keep up to date with what's going on. So yeah, I tell you what, these things are saving my butt at the moment because I don't think we'll be getting power on for quite a while. But anyway, we're going to braid this frame, go around the side of the house, get the power on to the freezer. So let's do it. Oh, look at it. These veggies will be getting a bit of loving. Yeah. They're still okay. Well, I've done all I can do. Lots of water coming in, so I don't know how this is going to go. You can see the wind blowing it off the roof there. Luckily we're in an old house. She's been through a few of these cyclones before, so I think she'll be right, but it's more all the stuff we got going. But all sorts of water coming in from everywhere. So just got to wait it out, I guess. See what happens. Hopefully the worst of it is now. It peters off after a while. So here we go. Whew. Okay, update. It's been about an hour later. The tide here is actually coming up. We're not due for a high tide until like midday, so the water table, because we're so close to the beach, is rising with the tide, which means the water can't escape, and it's just sitting on top of the water table and building up and up and up and up, and this is the result. We're ankle deep at the side of the shed. It's coming all through the shed now. I'm just lucky I got most of my things up on rack, and everything that's on the ground can get wet. But yeah, she's not letting up. I dare say we're going to have half a foot of water through this whole shed soon. Those kayaks might start floating. The chickens might start floating at that. But yeah, no, you can see she's really coming down sideways. So yeah, we're just going to wait it out, come back to you with another update in a little bit, see how we go. Well, here's the aftermath of it all. The rain's finally subsided. The water levels have gone down with the outgoing tide. We've still got a fair bit of water in the yard, but nothing like what it was. And yeah, survived round one. Apparently it's going to come back tonight hot and heavy, and there's a high tide tonight, so it might increase. But yeah, the whole back's all flooded, some trees down, nothing too crazy. The big trees all stayed up, which was good. I was a bit worried about that. And yeah, letting the chickens out for a little bit, and then they'll go back in the shed tonight. Yeah, still plenty of water. Makeshift chicken coop's done its job. There's been water through the whole shed, so it'll be a couple of days to let the weather settle down, and then everything's going to come out of the shed. Big clean up, make sure everything's dry, doesn't go mouldy, stuff like that. So days and days of recovery ahead. yeah, it was a bit unexpected, hot and heavy, and yeah. How'd you go? The garden survive? Chickens are going mad, they're happy to be here.
Spotted me with this.
Hey Val, you survived a little cyclone bit? Yeah. Yeah. The garden survived. We still got tomatoes. Look at them all. Zucchinis. Oh, one of my zucchini flowers has come off. Oh, pretty good.
Yes, girlies, I'm getting this stuff.
Look at them. Same mum with the food thing. Hey, you got the chickens coming in hot and heavy. Yeah.
Hey, we're getting your food.
Hey.
Yeah, girly pops, you can't have this, it's wet.
Hey, Genzy. Yeah. Hey, Baz. Okay, so we'll leave you there, and that is so far so good. Tell you what, the Bluetti's definitely helped out, but because we had fridges and freezers running off Bluetti's, plus lights in the shed all running off portable power. So we're out. How long were we without power for? Like 4 hours. So yeah, and I think the Bluetti inside is only a small one running the fridge, and it only got down to like 70%. So we could have easily done a full day and full night. So yeah, we'll leave you there and give you an update if this comes in hot and heavy tonight. Hopefully it doesn't, but everything's saying it will, so we'll bunker down for round 2. Well guys, it has been a wild couple of days to say the least, and here we are, probably 3 days after this entire shed was 3 to 4 inches underwater. Everything got soaked. I spent the last couple of days cleaning everything out, but we're finally back to a little bit of normality. Still got rain, squalls and wind and everything coming over, so what better time than to get stuck into some rig making in the shed. So the last couple of videos I've been saying that I want to really hone in and target some really big sharks, so that's what we're going to do today, gear up some gear ready to do exactly that. So we've got the old Penn Internationals we've got with our 80-pound marlin setup. We're going to be replacing that with a spool of 130-pound mono. We're going big this time. We've got our old rigs here that you can see. These things have been all chewed up, so we're getting rid of these. We're replacing them with big 16-0 circle hooks, and I'll be showing you how to turn it into this hot little rig here. So this is the shark rig I'll be running for the rest of the season. 500-pound wire, doubled over for a bite section, fully barbless steel circle hook, 400-pound leader, and we're going to start running some big different baits. So usually we run fish baits, be that tuna, mullet, stuff like that. We're going to start diversifying. We're going to be running stingrays, smaller sharks, stuff that really big sharks want to eat. That's what we're going to be using for bait. So these rigs are aimed to be able to handle really big stuff. And I've changed a few things in my rigs over the time. I've been shark fishing for a long time, and I always like to try new things. So over the past couple of years, there's been a few key items that have failed on me, those being swivel connections, #1. So I'm going to show you a few little different things I do with this trace that we're going to run this season that's going to eliminate my previous failures. So we'll get into that. So first of all, show you what we're running. We're going to run a 16-0 mustard inline circle hook. So the reason I run inlines over offset is because I have had in the past gut hook sharks with circle hooks. So even though they're a circle hook and they're designed to just pull into the corner of the jaw and hook nicely, if they're offset, which means the hook isn't in line, you'll see the barb is kicked out to the side. It does grab better, but at the same time, due to the gill setup of sharks, they do grab them way down the throat. So if you're going to run circles, make sure they're inline circles and you'll eliminate that. I'm also going to hit that with an angle grinder. We're going to take the barb completely off and then file that back so it's a very smooth transition. Because when you look at that hook and you think of it, once the hook has actually penetrated into the jaw like that,
for that to come back out, it has to do a full circle and come back out. So the chances of you losing a shark that's hooked properly on a circle is slim to none. So the point of having a barb is almost useless. There's no need for a barb, and that just means when it comes to getting the hook back out, you've got a very quick, easy release, nice, clean hook, de-hook as well. You'll see quite a few of these guys that twist the hooks out with big pliers or a de-hooking tool that still have the barbs on. You'll see quite a lot of blood coming out of the mouth of the shark, so we want to eliminate that completely. So as always, we run barbless, but just good practice. Circle hooks will rarely come back out if they're hooked properly the way they're meant to, so having a barb, it's really not really needed in this situation. We're going to be running some cable. Now, I buy this stuff online, you can get it from wherever you want. I'm running 465 pound, I think it's the equivalent of 1.8mm or 2mm wire. Now, the point I don't use really thick, heavy-duty cable is my theory, because I'm only running 130 pound setup, I'm not running these big, heavy rods. If you've got a big, heavy bit of wire in the water and you're pulling on it on one end and a shark's pulling on it at the other, the heavier your rig is, the harder it will be to get the tension up on that rig before drag starts pulling to get that hook in place. So it's the same kind of theory behind thin diameter braids in deep water. The thinner your diameter is, the better direct pull you'll have to the fish to set the hook. Same theory with shark fishing off the beach. You've got a lot of line out, a lot of mono in most cases, not so much braid. You braid backing, but you'll have a really decent mono top shot to stop any abrasion. And with that mono comes stretch. So the lighter you can make your rig, the tighter you'll be able to pull it and the easier you'll be able to get that hook to set, especially if the fish isn't hooking a million miles an hour in the opposite direction. You want to make sure that when you do drive that hook home, you've got a nice direct pull and you'll be able to drive that hook home, and you'll find a lot of bigger sharks, especially tigers and stuff, actually take off slow. They don't race away with the bait, so you've got to make sure that your rig is going to find home every time. So for that case, I'm using a thinner diameter wire to lighten the whole rig up. I'm only using wire to maintain a bite section. The rest will be mono because of the weight in the water. And then we're just going to simply double over a bite section near the bait. So should that bait get swallowed down to a certain point, we've technically got 800 odd pounds or 1,000 pounds of wire bite section there that they got to chew through to bite you off before anything happens disastrous. So with that being said, just a few crimps. We've got a spool of 400 pound mono. Now, I use this stuff all the time. It's 𝗵𝗿𝗄. You can use any brand. Mind you, it's shark fishing, so it doesn't have to be the best of the best, just so long as it is strong and you're confident in what you're using, that's totally fine. So this is 400 pound 𝗵𝗿𝗄. The only reason I'm using that is because I use this on my marlin skirts and I have big coils of it here for marlin season. So that's what I'm using. So we'll run 2 odd meters of wire for the bite section, probably 4 to 5 meters of 400 pound. I always run a wind-on leader as well, which is usually anywhere up to 10 odd meters of 400 pound again, and then that goes on to 130. So I don't need a hectic long leader. The 400 pound is purely for abrasion resistance against the body of the shark. So they have got really raspy skin. So if you're onto a shark for a while, or even for a short amount of time, but it's very erratic, that skin can wear through that mono very quickly. So you want to make sure you've got some pretty thick mono there. Again, mono over wire. A lot of people run 6-7 meters of wire cable for that abrasion resistance. I just tend to find that's a bit heavy for what I do to drive that hook home. I used to miss a lot of hookups on bigger sharks that weren't fully committing to the bait or just swimming off really slowly with the bait in their mouth. So I find this way seems to be able to hook the sharks a bit better. And that's about it. We're not going to use any swivels in the connections. I used to put a swivel between the wire and the mono. We're not doing that anymore because I've had even really expensive, high-end, strong swivels that I use for popping GTs fail on me. Mainly, I think, because they spend a lot of time in the water waiting for your bite. So you've got a lot more time in the salt water, a lot more time for corrosion to take place. So we'll get into it, guys. So first of all, we're going to get our wire. So got our 400-pound wire here. We're going to take roughly 2 metres or 2 arm lengths of that. So I'm just going to do 2 full arm lengths there. Going to snip that off with my little bit blunt pliers, but that's all I've got at the moment because my other pliers went swimming in the floods. So we're just make doing with what we've got. Now we've got our wire sorted, comes to the hook section. So we've got our 16-0 inline circle hook there. Now this is a steel hook, not a stainless steel hook. Whenever I do shark fishing, I try and avoid using stainless steel if I can. A, because these things rust. Stainless steel might rust, but it's going to take a lot longer to rust. And secondly, you can actually get a lot sharper tip on mild steel hooks than you can stainless steel. So you touch that up with a file quickly, put a bit of Vaseline on the end, which will stop the corrosion process while it's sitting in the water, and you'll have an ultra sharp tip on that. I also do the same when I'm marlin fishing. I run the 𝗟𝗲𝗄𝘆s, the steel ones, and I find that I can just touch up the tip every couple of hours and those hooks drive home a lot better than a lot of the stainless ones do. So we're going to grab 2 crimps. Going to grab our wire. We've got double sleeve crimps here, which are just a copper crimp, I believe. So we're going to run these throughout the entire rig. Some people say use alloy or mono. Just whatever you got on hand, really. It's the way you crimp it that will stop things breaking, not the actual crimp itself. So 2 crimps onto the wire. Then on goes our circle hook. And then from there, we are going to create a twisted double for a portion of the leader, and that will act as our bite section. So should a massive tiger shark, 16-footer, come up and eat the stingray bait or the small shark we've got on the end of this, the chances are it's going to go well down into its mouth before you actually hook it, and that circle hook comes back out, finds the corner of the jaw and hooks up. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a double section of wire to prevent them biting through this 400-pound while they take the bait down. So that eliminates bite-offs because big tigers will bite through wire quite easily, but it also eliminates us having to have a really thick, heavy wire cable. So we're going to go for approximately 2 feet of bite section. So if you think about it, 1 foot will get it in the mouth, 2 feet will get it down in front of the stomach area if he swallows it right down, and then pull it back out and we should be safe there. So what we want to do is actually hook the hook onto something. So we're going to hook it onto our international in this case. And you want to twist this the same as you would a bimini twist. So we're going to hook our hook into something. And what you want to do here is you don't actually just want to twist your cable around, because you'll find one part will spin, the other part will stay straight, and you'll get this weird kink happening in the wire. You actually want to do a 45-degree to each other. Pinch that. And then again, 45 degrees. Pinch it, 45 degrees. Pinch it. Oh, there goes the hook. You can see the pressure on the twist spinning the hook already. So that shows you that you've got consistent pressure on both sides of the wire, and the whole loop wants to spin instead of just one side of the wire. What that will do is create a really nice twist. If this was single strand wire, that'd be the perfect tail wire twist. And that means there's even pressure on both sides of the wire, and when your rig's crimped, it'll be perfect, it'll sit nice and straight. If you do the single twist, you'll find you actually have a curve in your wire, and everything will sit a bit skew-if. So we're going to continue this for our 2 feet of twisting, and then crimp off the end. So initially, before you do that, you want to run one of your 2 crimps down. So now we've got our loop section all measured out. We're going to run a crimp down, create our initial loop. Now make sure there's enough room there, because a lot of times you can use that loop to stitch a bait on, or use it as a holding point if you're running zip ties or anything like that. From that point, we will start doing our 45 turns with our wire, making sure we keep it nice and tight, nice and consistent, and try and get nice, even twists in the wire. I'm a little bit of a perfectionist when it comes to this. I like stuff looking uniform, so I can't have a whole heap of random sized twists in my wire. I like it all looking pretty, but that's just me basically. So you'll see all those are twisting around each other. You haven't got a straight wire and another wire wrapped around it. If that was the case, you'd find your wire would actually kink and bend, and you wouldn't get a nice straight trace. So what we'll do is we'll keep working our way up to the end of the trace, and then we'll slip our second crimp on, and even without those crimps crushed down, you'll see everything will sit nice and straight and true. So we'll quickly wrap this up, and we'll show you the end result. Okay, now we have our fully twisted section of leader. We've got our end here. We're just going to slide our crimp over the end, just like that. You can leave a tiny little bit of tag on wire, and then we'll start crimping these down. So whenever you're crimping wire, there's a key rule. You want to make sure your crimping tool is over the edge of the crimp by a couple of millimeters. What this does is actually cinches the edge down into the wire, whereas when you're doing mono, you do the opposite. So when we crimp our mono, our crimpers will be just inside the crimp to allow a flare out on the edge of the crimp, and that eliminates the crimp cutting into the mono and weakens it, whereas the holding point on this will be the crimp biting into the wire. So we'll double crimp this, one up this end, one down near the hook. Crimpers are just past the edge of the wire. I'm going to cinch it right down, do the other end, make sure you're on the same line. So you want to make sure you're crimping the same way on both ends. Crimp it down nice and tight. And for the middle, we want to rotate it 180 degrees. And then crimp again, because some crimping pliers cinch down on a particular angle or a particular way. And if you do all 3 crimps the same way, it can actually banana your crimp, because it'll have that consistent curve, that slight curve each time. Now, all of these things don't really matter when it comes to building a shark trace, but they're just things I have learned from doing marlin fishing over the years, because that tiny little bit of banana in a crimp can actually make a big 14-inch lure start spinning in the water when you're doing 7 or 8 knots. So attention to detail is a big thing when it comes to getting big lures and stuff swimming right, not spinning, looking really good in the water. So it's just good practice that if you start doing it now and you ever advance into heavy tackle marlin or even light tackle marlin, any sort of particular lure or rig making, good practice is always good to have in your back pocket. And if you do it consistently, it'll just be something you do straight off the get-go, and 9 times out of 10 you'll end up with that rig looking and performing in the best possible way it can. So I'm going to quickly crimp this one down near the hook here as well. So crimp just a couple of millimeters over the end of the crimp, cinch it down nice and tight on both ends. I'm going to rotate that 180 degrees, do the middle crimp, just like that. And there we go, we have our bite section of trace all done there, beautifully hanging nice and loose and limp and straight. It's not trying to coil or spin. It's nice and loose and bouncy, which means your actual trace is nice and straight. and that's our bite section. So all we're going to do here is crimp a connection loop in the end, and that's our bite section of our trace completed. So we'll grab another crimp. Now this is again personal preference. You can double crimp everything or just single crimp it like we're doing here. It all depends how much pressure you're going to be putting on your rig and how confident you are that your rig's going to hold up to the task you're putting it through. So, I just had to trim the end off there. My non-wire cutting pliers are not cutting wire. Surprise, surprise. They're actually split ring pliers with a little cutter from First Light Fabrication, but their little cutter's pretty good, so it's cutting through nearly 2mm wire, so kudos to you guys for making a solid pair of cutters. So I'm super confident that one crimp will hold on this wire cable. I'm not going to be putting anywhere near 400 pounds of pressure on this rig, so the weakest point of this rig will be around that 400 pounds, I assume, or the crimp. And being we're only running 130 pound mono, we're definitely not going to be putting that sort of pressure on. So at the last second when you wrap the trace, you might put a fair bit of pressure on a fish, but generally where we fish, we'll just be guiding them in nice and gently. So we don't tend to horse the sharks in and get them up on the beach or anything crazy, so we're not putting massive amounts of strain on our rigs. So 400 pounds should be plenty. Okay, and there we have it. There's our loop connection. So from there, we're going to build our monofilament part of the trace, which, as I mentioned before, is purely for abrasion resistance against the body of the shark. So the shark's hooked. This section here is preventing them from biting you off, and as that trace is going up the body of the shark as it's swimming away from you, the tail is constantly hitting on your line, or in worst case scenario it might wrap up in the tail at one point, or a dorsal fin or something, and really start chewing into it. So that's where that 400, 500, 600 pound mono, whatever you prefer, will come into play. So we'll put this aside and we'll pull out a couple of metres of our 400 pounds. So we're going to run probably, we'll do 5 metres of 400 pound mono. So, whoop, flicking it at the camera. So with that being said, 5 metres and approximately 2 metres of wire is 7 metres. There's no way we're catching a 7 metre long shark. And then, as I said before, I also run a wind-on leader on top of that. So we've got about another 10 odd metres of 400 pound wind-on. So we have got ample abrasion resistance for a proper big shark. I'm talking 12 foot plus, 13, pushing that 14 foot range. And we've got plenty of abrasion resistance against that. So the aim here is to try and get something around that 1,000 pounds off the sand. Now, I've come pretty close in the past. I'll throw up a couple of photos now of some of the bigger tigers we've got. One of them was only about 6 inches shy of the all-tackle land-based world record at the time. Now, that was many years ago when I didn't have a bigger boat, so we were limited in how we could tackle big fish. But we used to give it a solid nudge, and I know of a couple of crews out there now. There's a bloke called 𝗟𝗲𝘁'𝘀 and another fella called 𝗟𝗲𝘁𝘀𝘆. Now those guys have been going hard over many years, and those guys were consistently getting 12, 13 footers off the beach. I think they even had one close to 14 foot there, so I know that record is well and truly broken now, but it's hard to find any sort of records of this sort of stuff. But it's definitely something I've always wanted to do, is tick that 1,000 pound kind of region off the bucket list, and hopefully we're going to do it on camera. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 arm lengths of mono. Snip that off there, put that aside. Okay, and it's as simple as a loop-to-loop connection, but we are going to use chafe tube. Now, this is just a hard plastic hollow tube that, again, I use for marlin fishing a lot. We use this on our mono whenever we're doing a wire to mono connection, where the wire can either get a little bit rusty or maybe the edge of the wire can fan out and start damaging the mono. This is just 100% reassurance that the mono can't get damaged from that connection. And also whenever you're using clip swivels. So what we're going to do is we're just going to lube it up, because this one's a bit of a tight fit. This chafe tube is legitimately 2 millimetre of thickness. Put it through our double crimp here, and then the trick is with chafe tube, you want to put the tube down the tag end of the crimp. Once you've done that, you can purely just pull your main line and it cinches shut really nicely. If your chafe tube's the other way around, you'll have a pain in the ass trying to pull that over and bend your chafe tube, because it is quite stiff and hard to bend. So make sure it's on the tag end, just pull your main line end and it'll curve around really nice and easy like that. Again, we're going to leave a little bit of a tag. If this was marlin fishing, I'd burn the end with a lighter and create a little nub that fits in nicely on that crimp, but being as sharks aren't really particular and everything doesn't have to be visually pleasing, we're just going to do that. And for your crimping, I don't know whether you'll see that, but I've got about 1.5 millimetres or 2 millimetres of crimp hanging outside the crimping tool, not inside like we did with the wire. And then we're going to cinch down on the mono. And what that does is creates a flare out and eliminates the edge of the crimp from biting into the mono, and it won't reduce the strength of your leader. So we're going to do that on both ends, nice and neatly. Spin it around 180 degrees like we do. One in the middle. And we have a beautiful crimped loop connection. Now that goes onto the clip swivel that's on the reel, and that is your connection to your trace. On the other end, we're going to do the exact same thing. Crimp, chafe tube, loop connection, except onto the wire leader. So another hot tip here is get a nice sharp pair of scissors or a knife, and if you're putting heavy mono through crimps that are very tight, like they're the perfect size, I like to cut it on an angle, and that just helps me start the feed through the crimp. It makes it a lot easier than a blunt end. So if you cut mono straight with a pair of scissors, it'll kind of bite and burr out a little bit, especially on heavier mono. So if you cut it on the angle, it just helps it go through a bit easier. Okay, grab our trace, and it's as simple as sliding it on, putting the mono back through your crimp. Again, chafe tube down the tag end of your crimp. Pull your main line nice and tight, and there we have loop-to-loop connection. Now I used to run a swivel there to kind of help with the spinning of the cables and everything, but I've since had a few fail. Hooked up to a really, really big shark, and it just gave way, and I thought, oh, it's bitten me off or something, and I brought it up and I still had my mono and the top half of my swivel. So I've eliminated that weak point. There is no way this is giving way. One has to snap, either 400-pound wire, 400-pound mono, and given we're running 130-pound mono as our leader, well, not our leader, our main line, sorry, I'm not putting that much pressure on, so it's going to be impossible to snap that from my point of view anyway. So we'll crimp that down, and that is our shark chase completed. So it's simple as crimping down. Make sure you leave that flange because it's mono. You don't want the edge biting in. Now they do have aluminium crimps specifically for mono, but At the moment, everywhere's shut because we've just been flooded, so I'm just using what I have on hand, and this will work just fine. Swing around 180 degrees, crimp that middle down, and voila, loop to loop. So now the only thing for me to do is get the grinder out. We're going to cut this barb off, grind it down nice and flat, and then you can either hit that with a bit of spray paint or wrap an anode around it if you're really worried about it rusting. Generally, I'll run these hooks for a fair while. If they get really rusty, I'll just hit them with a bit of wire brush, a bit of black spray paint, and then take them out. They will rust after one trip, especially if you're cutting into the coating. But in saying that, that is the best way to go about shark fishing instead of running stainless. Because if you lose a stainless hook or your whole cable comes off and it's stainless, like I said, if it's got a barb on, there's no way that hook's coming out. At least if you've got no barb, they've got a better chance of shaking the hook. And have it being mild steel and not stainless, that will oxidise and rust out. So you've got a very thin tip on a circle hook. So once that tip rusts off, because that'll be the first thing that rusts, the rest of the hook is free to come out. And if there's no barb on it, the shark will be happy and that thing will just fall out. So we'll wrap all this up now, take our barb off, and that is our trace completed. Now the next part is putting some heavier mono on our reel. So a lot of the times I just run 80-pound mono when it comes to my shark reels. The reason being is I'm usually doing heavy tackle marlin season, and that's a mono I run for heavy tackle marlin. I haven't got a whole heap of reels here to chop and change in between. I haven't got specific shark reels, so I just use a marlin rod and reel. And that's what I roll with at the time. But being marlin season's over, we're coming into the cooler months, and I won't be out over the shelf chasing those big things anymore. We're going to load her up at 130 pounds. So first things first, we're going to rip all this 80-pound mono off. It's had a full season. I usually throw it away after a season anyway. And then after that, we're just going to do a simple FG connection to our 100-pound braid backing, 130-pound top shot, and we're ready to go. So we'll get this line off and get ready to tie on the 130. Now guys, before we get into the next part of this rigging segment, a huge shout out to the legends at Bluetti for sponsoring this video. Now at the start, you would have seen me running around plugging everything we had into these Bluettis during our little post-cyclone flood session. The power was off for the best part of half a day. We've got a nice little baby inside. We have to look after. All the food and milk has to stay chilled, and the Bluettis pulled us out of the poo at the flick of a switch. Now this Elite 200 I've got here, the V2 version, this was plugged into our household fridge the entire blackout period, and it only went down to 70%, meaning we could have got up to 2 days out of this running our household fridge full of food. Wouldn't have lost anything. Bub would have been happy. All the food would have been safe. Also had a smaller Bluetti around the side running our freezer, which has all my baits in it. And then another Bluetti in the shed here running lights while I was throwing the chickens in and making sure all our little stock weren't going to start swimming away over in the neighbour's fence. Now, the cool thing about these Bluettis is not only can you have them as a backup source, this guy here actually lives in the canopy of our ute. So as quick as the floodwaters were coming up, I just ran out, ripped it clean out of the ute, unplugged the solar. It was 100% charged, just sitting in the back of the ute, ticking away on the solar over the days the car wasn't being used. Throw it into the kitchen, plug the fridge in, and within minutes I had our household appliances that meant the most to us for survival were on backup power in a matter of minutes. And the cool thing was I could have this inside the kitchen with us monitoring what was going on. If the water level was going to rise, I could lift both the fridge and the power unit up out of the water, make sure everything was still on, still safe. Speaking of safety, these things are a battery operated pack. That means you don't have pesky fumes or noise out there that a generator would be doing. You'd 9 times out of 10 have a Jenny kicked over in the backyard somewhere running fumes and a long ass extension lead into the house so you could power your things. But As you saw, a heap of sideways rain and quickly rising floodwaters. There are limited places you can have a petrol genset kicking around outside without issues starting to happen. Zero maintenance on these things too. They've got an insane amount of charge statistics, and that means that you have got an easy plug and play system that's going to pull you out in a hairy situation every single time you need it. Now, if we got stuck in a bind, the cool thing about the Bluettis too is they have a multitude of ways of charging, and obviously with the power out you have got the solar option of charging, but being that it was absolutely bucketing down sideways and flooding outside, we also had the Charger 1 option. So you would have seen in a previous video the Bluetti Charger 1, which gives you an increased 12-volt charging capacity from your vehicle. So if you had a car in a side shed or out in the driveway, you could plug the Charger 1 into your car, kick the car over idling, and recharge your unit from a car while it was just standing still doing nothing. In a matter of a couple of hours, you'd be back up to full charge, if not really close to it, and that would keep you going for another 2+ days, depending what sort of devices you've got running off this. Now, we've got the whole canopy in the camp car ready to go for off-grid, and they're all wired up for electric appliances. We've got an induction cooker, so that was replacing our cooktop inside while the power was out. We've got a host of other things. We've also got hot water shower, camp showers. You can plug your little pumps into the Bluetti, and there you go. You've got a hot shower while the power's out, while all these disasters are going. These things are a very, very good little addition to pulling you out of a hairy situation. And not only that, they can then be transferred back over into the ute, and that's your weekend to weekend power supply sorted. Fully portable, fully ready to go all of the time in any situation. No fumes, no maintenance. They're just a one and done kit. So if you guys have been through what we've just been through and you might have got caught out, I seriously recommend jumping over to the Bluetti website. Check out their full range. They've got everything from these brand new Elite 200 V2s, which have more power in a more compact model, giving you more portable options. They've got compatible solar panels, the Charger 1 units. They've got everything there. Everything is eco-friendly with these guys. The noise is absolutely minimal. There's no maintenance. You don't have to have a jerry can full of fuel aside. All you have to do is plug this thing in and it's ready to go. And you also know that you have a multitude of charging options should the prime charging option of 240 volt, like when the power goes out, not be available. So jump over to the Bluetti website, guys. Check them out. They are a worthwhile investment that can be used absolutely anywhere for just about any situation, and be it camping at your leisure or pulling you out of a storm flood, these guys have 100% got your back. So thank you again, Bluetti, for sponsoring this video, and let's get back to rigging these big reels, see if we can get our 1,000-pound shark. Okay, now that we're at the end, that's it. We're currently running 100-pound braid backing. Now, 99% of braids will actually snap well above their designated pound rating. So a 100-pound braid most likely will snap at 110, 120, even 130 pounds. So we're running a 100-pound braid, and that is just with an FG connection to my 80. So we're going to snip that off and do a FG connection to our 130 instead. Now, I won't do an FG knot tutorial, but I will show you how I do it. It's a one-man task. I do them quite quick in the boat this way too. So if you want to try it this method, it's really good for running and gunning and tying new leaders while you're on the go. Okay, so we've got our bulk spool of 130 pound here, and we've got our 100-pound braid. Now, rod in the holder, or reel in this case, these are really nice 2-piece bent butt rods from Penn, so I can just take the rod off, do my maintenance on my rollers, and keep the reel bolted to the reel seat for the next fishing trip. So what I do is I actually put the braid in my mouth, in my teeth, to keep tension on it, and then I'll feed the mono through the braid. And what I'll do is I'll just worm it side to side. I do 20 wraps and then a half hitch to secure it, making sure everything's nice and tight. And I find that with heavy braid on heavy mono, that's the best way for it to cinch down, really get that really tight connection. So when you pull your FG tight, especially on heavy mono, you want your braid to bite in, and it almost looks like it goes a little bit translucent. That's how you know you've got a really good purchase on your FG knot, with heavy braid to heavy mono. So a good tip there. So we'll quickly throw it in our mouth, grab a nice bit of leader, and I'm just gonna go side to side, worm it through. Make sure I've got a bit of tension on, not a heat, but enough to keep it nice and tight. All my side to sides are sliding down. I know I sound a bit weird because I've got braid in between my teeth, but... Oh, and there is my neighbour starting his mower conveniently while we're doing this. Okay. So... Okay, so there's the initial start of it. So that's my 20 wraps held in place with a half hitch. Crank my drag up to full. I'm going to pull my braid loops down nice and tight so everything's bunched up the way it should be and all joining. And then we're going to wrap our mono and pull against a full lock drag. So what that does is it cinches everything nice and tight, especially if you're solo, and even wrap it on your arm, really give it to it, put your whole body weight on it, and then you'll see that your braid actually bites in and it changes colour a bit from the natural braid, and that means that it's really bit down into that mono. From there I just do my half hitch connections up top, and that's our mono to braid connection right there. Well guys, that is it. We've finally spooled our 𝗟𝗲𝗄𝘆 up with a 130-pound mono top shot. We've just got to grab a 400-pound wind-on leader when the shop's open up again, and this rod and reel will be ready for business. We have got our 400-pound 𝗟𝗲𝗄𝘆 shark trace with the bite section, and then 400-pound leader. We have got our mild steel inline circle with no barb, all ground down, ready to go for the best catch and release practice out there. So I hope you enjoyed this one, guys. Something a little bit different. As I said, we've just been through a major flood event, so we're definitely not out on the water today, but we will be out there soon. And the next video will be hunting for bait to put out on this big rig. So stay tuned for that one, guys. As always, stay safe, be happy. See you guys on the next episode.